survivors, welcome to the State of Decay 2 stream. I'm your host, Jeffrey Card, and over here we've got our guests, Cale Schupman. He was the story lead on Heartland. You like your title there? He's a story guy on Heartland, and over there next to him is Andy Collins, who of course is our writing guy. These guys are here to talk about Heartland and sort of how we came at the story of it, because Heartland is this pretty unique thing in the State of Decay 2 landscape and the amount of storytelling it does. And so we really, after we got Luis to come in here and tell us about the map, we really wanted you guys to come in and tell us about the star of the show, which is this story.
Oh, jeez, thanks.
But before we talk to you guys, we should also say, hey, look, it's Brant.
It's Brant!
Everyone, Brant is here because that's what you look like, Brant, right there. Okay, he's freaking out. Let's switch. So what we're going to be talking about real quick is, of course, State of Decay 2 Heartland, which is what we're always talking about this month, because it's now available on Game Pass. You can buy it for $10. It's out there in the store, so if you haven't gotten it already, please go out and get it. And we're going to play some of it right here for you. So, Brant, why don't you show us what you're doing here?
I'm about to press the A button.
Oh, that is my favorite button. We're going to look at who are these two people?
This is the last Wilkerson arc of Heartland, and we are looking at Laurice and Aunt Fee.
So, let's see. So Andy, do you want to talk to us a little bit about how we I should ask Cale, because we kind of needed a different process to come up with the story for these characters, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the difference between going from what we were doing before, which is lots of stories that were sort of scattered all over the map, doing all kinds of different things, versus this very specific story we were trying to tell.
Yeah. So State of Decay 2, as you guys know, is a lot more procedural. Our theory was very much, we want you to find your own story in the world, in the map, and kind of experience these different sort of, stories around that world. And, one of the pieces of feedback we heard a lot was, with procedurally generated characters, some people were having trouble connecting, to their survivors, and, just wanted kind of more of a handcrafted story experience. And so, with this mode, we aim to do something a little more linear and, try and create an experience where you care a lot more about characters. And Quinn and Andy and myself kind of brainstormed some different formats that could take place, and we came up with this format by which there would only be 12 survivors in the world, and that's it.
Valley,
So you can still die like you can in State of Decay, but
this place.
when those characters are dead, that is a very specific character that you met and killed.
We're getting a lot of feedback that the game volume is too loud. So
I've just pulled it down. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we decided we were going to tell this linear story of these two different groups that you can bring into the valley, and in order to do that, we did kind of like a writer's room, set up kind of a Hollywood writer's room, and basically just asked ourselves, what kind of stories do we want to see in this world? What have we not seen in State of Decay yet? We kind of we came up with a bunch of characters out of that that we were interested in, a lot of arcs that we were interested in, and we married that with kind of the larger sort of meta story that was going on in Trumbull Valley, this idea of the blood plague coming in and taking over, and without giving away spoilers.
I think a lot of our audience has played at least deep enough into the game that they know the blood plague is here.
Yeah. And so kind of having these characters with specific arcs that you could relate to and follow, and then discover that there was this larger story happening in the valley, so as you come into the valley, it becomes less of your character's story and more the story of your community, and how they overcome this larger threat. So we thought it was a nice blend of linear storytelling with more traditional sort of State of Decay 2 style storytelling, where actions still have consequences and your story can still continue. You can still beat the mode if these characters die. But we wanted people to care about the characters more, to understand why they were invested in this place and time and in each other. Yeah.
So developing the specific cast of characters. I mean, there were some constraints we had to live under, right, Andy?
Right. We already have voices for our characters. We've recorded thousands of lines apiece for each of those 14 playable character voices. We couldn't go back to the drawing board and start afresh. So those were our starting points. We already had some personalities established for those characters. So starting from those points, those fixed points, we worked toward them by crafting story ideas, character ideas, and then those two parts moved together slowly until we had a matchup of voices and personalities and stories that we wanted to tell.
Yeah. One of the fun little insider details that I like about this is the fact that some of these characters have names that actually were the names we were using for those voices for a really long time. Want to talk about that a little bit?
Every one of the 26 procedural voices that we created for the original game, 14 playable characters and 12 non-recruitable folks that you can meet in the world in various places, had a code name so that we could keep them straight.
Yeah. And also so that the actors had a sense of who they were playing.
Right, we needed to attach something there. You're not just survivor number 6. You're Fiona or Gabriel or Helena or et cetera, et cetera.
So it's kind of funny that these sort of like made-up character identities that weren't really real in the original game, we actually have developed them further now. Now they actually feel like real people.
Exactly.
I'm about to engage the first of our new freaks.
Go charge him.
I think he just wants hugs. I think
Give it a shot.
he's like he's like a really cool puppy dog.
I noticed someone earlier in the chat had tentatively identified Aunt Fee as being Alicia Hawks from the Lifeline expansion. That's a very keen ear. It's actually the same voice actor playing both of those parts.
Nice! Wow!
So,
I'm impressed they pulled that out.
Well listened. Jin Hammond was one of our favorite folks that we worked with on the original game. So when the opportunity came to cast some local Seattle folks in State of Decay 2, she was definitely right up there on our list.
Uh-oh. He's getting the feral.
That looks armored.
Mr. Dodgy.
Bang, bang.
Oh, his head is
exposed.
exposed. Oh, but it didn't matter. He's gonna toss me. There we go.
Something about that red pink head makes me so uncomfortable every time I see it. It's
like
exposed and just
Exposed brain or something.
Yeah.
Leave her alone. Oh, I got him.
Nice.
Me, that was not
Nice.
a normal fail.
So one thing we knew going into this expansion was that most players who were going to play it probably have already played some amount of State of Decay 2, so we didn't have to have quite as gentle of a ramp to get you in. So we really wanted to start the gameplay off with a bang, just right away, see the threat that's in the valley, the blood freak, the blood siege that happens, at the base, just get you into the action quickly, and hopefully that came across.
It also helps establish the threat
Yeah.
of this place. That this is a dangerous location. There's lots of blood-plagued zombies to defend against, as well as these new versions of freaks. Even if you're familiar with the game, we wanted you to know right from the get-go. There's something different that you're going to be running into here.
So Spectre Saunders asks, how long after State of Decay 2 is Heartland set? It looks like around 6 months, he says. Maybe, end of summer, start of autumn?
We're fairly vague on our timelines for that. You could assume this is happening within probably a few months of State of Decay 2 starting. We try not to nail down precise dates because they don't tend to make a lot of sense. You might have been playing the game for 6 in-game months before this comes out, whereas somebody else jumps in and plays it for 3 days before they start playing this. But yeah, I think it's safe to assume that a little bit of time has passed since that tutorial at Camp Osprey, but probably not a lot.
And then between State of Decay 1 and Camp Osprey was about what?
About 15 months, I believe we said.
So this is probably, so it's definitely more than a year.
Yeah.
Seems fair to me.
So there are, there's a lot of elements from the original State of Decay that, the whole point of Trumbull Valley was to come back and sort of see how this world has progressed. Like, how did you guys think about sort of bringing in, like, which elements to bring in and how to bring them in from the original experience?
I remember brainstorming a huge list. Just going back to my memories of the game and relying on the fan wiki to jog those from time to time.
Because all of us here in this room, except for Brant, started as State of Decay fans.
That's right.
Like, we played the original game. We didn't make the original game.
Right. Right. But I knew these locations. I had driven around in this valley for hours and hours and hours. So I made a list. Other folks made their own lists. We brought them together, put lots of stickies up on whiteboards, and started seeing where those were coming together.
Yeah. Brought Brant in.
Yeah. Really early on, for instance, we knew, hey, the Wilkersons have to play some part in this, right? They were such a big deal in the first game. On the other hand, there were other characters, other places that one of us would remember and none of the others did, so those were a little lower on our priority list.
I think the other thing that we definitely wanted to do was maintain player canon, and so making sure that we weren't bringing back characters that could be dead in your game, right? That's why you don't see Marcus, for instance, because your Marcus might be dead, your Marcus might be alive, and we didn't want to make a call for your personal experience. We wanted you to maintain that and have that still be your own State of Decay canon, and only reintroduce characters that would still canonically be alive.
Yeah,
So people like Ray Santos.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
The only place we potentially cheated a little bit on that is our Heartland assumes that the survivors that were there, Lily's group or somebody, got out of the valley.
That's true.
So
Yeah, you could still be there today. We don't know.
we had to make that decision because that's a pretty critical one for knowing what this place is like.
Yeah, and we kind of already had made that call for State of Decay 2 because Lily is out there running the network.
Exactly.
So you ended up with kind of two big factions, three actually, I guess, two big factions that were out there from the original story, and then one that kind of came in, just as a part of Heartland. And so, like, how did you settle on that? It was going to be Wilkersons and Santos specifically that were the main two.
The Wilkersons were our first one. That was sort of our no-brainer story. I remember the group coming up with that one very, very early in the process, and having a basic form for that story right from the get-go. And what we struggled with was trying to come up with a parallel story that would feel as compelling and exciting, particularly to returning players. For a while, we didn't have a parallel character to meet up with, and that felt wrong. So we racked our brains for like, who's the best person to come back? You know, do we have a return from Judge Lawton? Well, no, we didn't really like her.
And I think she might have died.
Maybe she died.
Yeah, there was plenty of opportunities for that particular enclave to meet a sticky, gross end.
And ultimately we said, well, Ray Santos, he was a fun character. A little ethically questionable from the beginning, which gives you some nice potential for drama there. Doesn't quite have the same gravitas as your Wilkersons, but still played a pretty significant role in the original game as a nice, memorable face.
Seems like there's no such thing as a safe place.
Character personality that we could bring back in this game. So that one is a little less dramatic than going back to find your father. So we had to amp up the tension of it. Oh, this guy's been a friend to Lily since then, but they've been out of radio contact. What's the drama? What's the tension that's going to bring you into the story?
So I should establish some rules about spoilers. Wonder is mentioning in Slack that several players have requested that we don't spoil the ending of Heartland because they haven't gotten to it yet.
Yep.
So I just wanted to say that out loud. We are probably going to need to, just to be able to discuss the structure of the story, talk a little bit about sort of the overall flow of the story, like how it kind of comes together. But we're not going to reveal anything about the ending or any cliffhanger-y stuff or anything like that. So rest assured, if the ending is what you're waiting for, we're not going to talk about a whole lot of endgame content until next week. Next week we're going to focus on the Gauntlet. So if you want to talk about that, then definitely come back in a week. So where are we going right here, Brant?
We're taking back Malik's former base.
Oh, we actually got a question about Malik. A Nezumi fan wants to know if the Malik voice actor was new or if he was from our original.
No, he's
set.
a returning actor from State of Decay. There are exactly 2 actors in Heartland that weren't in State of Decay 2. One of them is Patrick Seitz, who reprises his role as Mickey Wilkerson. He played him in the original game. He's also one of our voice directors, so he's easy to get in touch with. And then we brought in an actor to play the Cleo voice, and I'm completely blanking on her name because I wasn't prepared for that question.
He was actually the guy who played Mickey was also my voice director when I did the voice for Alan Gunderson.
Patrick is a big old teddy bear.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
So yeah, here we are taking back Malik's base. Malik, it was a fun character. I really like his voice. It's got a nice different sound to it from a lot of our other ones. And for this character, we wanted to build somebody who had a bit of sorrow to his story. You're taking back this home that he used to share with other people here. And he's also not exactly a local to Trumbull. We're establishing him as someone who came back to Trumbull as a refugee from Danforth, the city that's featured in Lifeline. Obviously, city's not a good place to be in the zombie apocalypse. So once that barrier comes down between Danforth and the Valley, we figured there's got to be people coming into this place that is safer than the city. So he's one of those folks who have migrated the opposite way from Lily's group.
Steve-O69 wants to know, why doesn't Mickey's face look the same between State of Decay's 1 and 2?
We couldn't use all the same art. We don't build characters quite the same way as we did in the original game. So we had to do a sort of best approximation given the tech that we've got. That's about as much as I understand. I don't know if Brant wants to chime in more of that.
All of our characters in State of Decay 2 are scanned from real people, and Mickey was not from the original game. So we had to do an approximation based on people we had available.
Yeah, and if we ever did, manage to bring back any of the old characters from the game, that you should expect that the same thing will happen. Ray Santos also looks different, and if we in the future ever do bring back any additional characters, they will also look different, but they will look more like real human beings because they will have been scanned from actual live actors. Let's see here. So.
All right, so we've taken back Jurassic Junction.
That's right.
How awesome is it?
The most beloved of all locations in the original game.
Yeah, back when Brant and I used to just stream the original game every month, it kind of would have been fun to realize that someday we were actually going to get to live in Jurassic Junction. We hung out here a lot.
Yep.
A fun thing we did here in the studio, I wanted to craft a bunch of random banter that characters could say while they're hanging out at base. You can just sort of hear people talking about this location that you're in. So I opened it up to the studio and said, hey, everybody loves Jurassic Junction. What might people say as they're living in this dinosaur-themed truck stop? And collected dozens of lines from folks here in the studio and crafted those into dialogue that was appropriate for each of the voices. So that was a really fun exercise, a nice way to give a lot more folks in the studio a chance to be game writers for a day.
There was some fun stuff that came out of that.
Yeah, most of the sort of random banter that people, lines that the characters speak about the base came out of this studio. They weren't from me, they were from the folks around me. That was fun.
So we're going to quickly do a giveaway. So we've still got some Heartland codes lying around that we haven't given away to anybody yet. And so we're going to give away 3 codes right now, 1 to YouTube, 1 to Mixer, and 1 to Twitch. So I'm going to ask you guys a trivia question. If you know the answer, chime in the chat. We're going to do a random selection from the first dozen or so people who reply on each, who reply correctly on each channel. So here's the question. The question is, what organization brought Chavez to Trumbull Valley? So thanks to Andy for coming up with that question. So what organization brought Chavez to Trumbull Valley? So put your answers in the chat. Megan's going to be tabulating them, and we're going to come back here in a little bit and get the right answer. But before we go back to the gameplay, we should also mention that our Refurium event is still going on. If you guys haven't gone to refurium.com and tracked down State of Decay 2 and gotten involved, if you like watching State of Decay 2 streams, you can actually get prizes for watching State of Decay 2 streams. And so go and find out how that works at refurium.com. And now we will go back to the gameplay.
Prizes?
So I'm pretty sure you've already gotten all of the prizes that we have. So why 2 storylines up front?
Oh, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Because it's cool.
Yeah.
This is the same sort of thing that I fought for with our original tutorial. I'm not a fan of games that only have one set of
It's
characters
time to
that
get
you
back
can
to what I'm
play
here
and only
for.
one story you can experience. I like providing variety. It's more fun as a writer, and I think it's more empowering to the player to be able to pick a story and characters that you identify with for whatever reason.
Hey, I'm looking for Mickey Wilkerson.
So in
Do
this
you know where I
case,
can find him?
we felt like 2 stories was manageable for our scope. In hindsight, we may have, that may have been a little more than we should have done, but we got them in there, and it lets us give you 2 different starting sets of characters who look and feel different. They play differently. They have different specialty skills and quirks about them. So it gives you a natural second playthrough as well. Even if you've beaten the game with one pair, like, well, I wonder what this would be like with Larissa and Aunt Fee. Let me go try them and see how they do.
And managing such a complex storyline when you're actually implementing the missions. I mean, this was something that we've done a little bit of it in the original game, but nothing on this scale. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the challenges that brought with it?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest difficulty, of course, is most games, most AAA action games, your character dies, you see a cool scene of them dying, and then you start right back up again. All the Lara Croft like murder death scenes, and then she's back. That's not how State of Decay works. If you die, you die. And we've got to deal with that, and that's probably the biggest single challenge. That and all the other things that can crop up in the simulation, over time. And so,
There we go.
with having to do 2 different sets of characters, those characters both have their own sets of missions, especially early on. They do have moments where they come together and converge on the kind of story of the map, the story of Trumbull Valley. But we also wanted to pay off, kind of that story later in the mode. And so what we do is we have a lot of missions that we kind of duplicated early on, and it was a lot of work. Because for Leah, these were her missions, and she had a lot of logic in there to deal with all of these kind of fallbacks.
Leah's absolutely the stealth MVP of this expansion.
Oh, big time.
She tanked our mission content, and every time we came up with another, we have to build another branch for this particular if-then, she just took those on one after another. It turns out that you have to account for what if the main character dies, what if the secondary character dies, what if the secondary dies before the main, what if they die after the main, what if they both die, then what happens?
Because we kind of in regular State of Decay 2, we don't worry about it too much. If a character dies and they have a personal arc, we just kill that mission line and whatever, it goes away and you move on. But in this case, the entire main story was about a particular character or two, and like if Larissa dies, why are we here? Because we're here to meet her dad.
Well,
right?
that's sort of the at a high level, the design of the story for the entire DLC lent itself to bringing in multiple characters, because you start with this character's goal, this kind of surface level goal of I want to find my father, I want to find Santos, and we actually resolved that very quickly early on. And the reason why is because they discovered that there's other things that they need to be caring about once they get in there. And so, you come in with this sort of initial idea of like, oh, this character needs this, but very quickly, you see the larger issue at hand. And so, we felt like we could have multiple characters' viewpoints leading into that, and and then have kind of that larger story take over. So even if Larissa does die, you can still save the valley. Your community can still persist and honor her legacy and save the valley. Yeah.
We've got some winners for our trivia question. So real quick, the answer to this, and what organization brought Chavez to Trumbull Valley? The answer is Red Talon. So a lot of you got that right. The winners who are going to get Heartland codes are Partisan on YouTube, Asapor1 on Twitch, and Devorian on Mixer. So congratulations to you folks. Megan and Joe are going to be trying to get in contact with you guys to arrange transmitting a code to you. In the meantime, we're going to keep talking to these guys. So, talking about Chavez and Red Talon, why is Chavez in the game? Did you want to talk about how do we zero in on these particular side characters who brought their own stories in?
His was a fun story. I really want. One of the things that was fun to do in Heartland in general was provide callbacks to previous versions of the game. We've got callbacks to the original game. Obviously, we've got some small references to Lifeline. In this case, Chavez is a reference to Daybreak, previous DLC for this very game. So he was here with a Daybreak team, just like the one that you might have been playing last summer when it came out. The rest of his team died and he ran off. So he is the last survivor of a Daybreak team who was here with a technician monkeying with one of those weird Clio towers. So that was just our little sort of wink to the players who have been with us and playing through all our DLC.
One of the cool things that we could do in this mode was because there was only one map, and we could tailor the environment to the stories of the characters, right? So if you go and meet Isby, for instance, her don't give away too much. You guys should all go find Isby. But her house is tailored towards her as a character. Yep. And we couldn't really do that in the base game because these stories could take place not only in 3 different maps, but in like dozens of locations all around that map. And so they couldn't all have versions of that building that were specifically dedicated to a specific character. So we got to have a lot of fun with that this time around. And hopefully you guys are seeing some of those cool details that the art team was able to put in there.
So one thing I should mention, by the way, those of you who won the giveaway, contact Megan at social@undeadlabs.com to make sure that you guys get in contact with her. And that was not our last giveaway. We're actually going to do another one in about 15 minutes. So if you didn't win that one, please stick around. We'd love to give you a chance to win the next one. What about the other characters? Like we've got say Reba. Tell us a little bit about her and
Oh, poor Reba. Reba is a tough old bird. She has seen the worst that the apocalypse has to throw at her, and she's lived through all of it, unlike the rest of her family. A bit of a tragic story. But it has rendered her a little bit hard-edged, a little bit hard-bitten, and when we meet her in this game, she has managed to basically piss off everybody else in town. You are her last hope for finding a friend or someone who will help her with her tasks. So depending on which story you're playing in, you might meet her with a different need, but she is inevitably going to tell you to go get something for her and let you run into one of the local enclaves while you're doing it.
Well, so actually, one of the things that was interesting about Reba was we were planning. There was a lot of different ways we could have handled the 2 different enclaves being on the map, and I was assigned to make the Reba mission, and so I sort of assumed up front, well, obviously, both of these enclaves are going to be on the map, and so I wrote her whole mission arc, designed her mission arc to assume that she would go to see the Wilkersons and go to see the Santoses. And then I found out that was not actually what you had in mind, and so we ended up having to sort of bend everything out of shape to accommodate Reba, basically originally Santos was not going to be there if you were going to be with the Wilkersons and vice versa. Yeah. But we had to make it happen because we were already pot committed to what we were doing with Reba.
That's how we roll, We solve problems as they come up.
But it's interesting that there's just all these different little pieces that all kind of have to come together. And there's lots of stories like that throughout the game where
Well, and even in the development of the character, right? Like when we were first in that writer's room, we kind of just at a very high level, we're just like, what haven't we seen in State of Decay yet? What kinds of character tropes have we not explored yet? And at that point, they're all kind of generic. That feels like, do we really just want to see this generic kind of character in here? And it's like, well, once we actually start developing the character and bouncing her off the other, sorts of characters that are already in the game and the situation in the game, right, like having Reba have a relationship with the Wilkersons and have a relationship with the Santoses, right? She starts to come alive, and she's no longer just a trope. She's a specific character in this universe, right? And I feel like that personality was able to really come through in this mode.
Yeah, I love the way that you wrote her lines, Andy. Just the way she's sort of like kind of patronizing to you a little bit, in that sort of like old Southern lady way.
Yeah, just a little bit. One of the fun things about creating lots of different voices for this game is we could diversify in ways that maybe we haven't before. And in the case of both the Reba and the Quincy voices, we were able to skew a little bit older. And that let us play with some fun personality types that you might not have seen if all the voices sounded like they were 30 years old.
So Jacobel Trades wants to know why aren't there any hostile enclaves to fight in Heartland?
I think that hostile enclaves, hostile NPCs are not the most compelling part of State of Decay. They're there because we thought it was an important thing to try, but they're really hard to get balanced right without more work than we could frankly afford to put into them. So I think we decided fairly early on that it just wasn't that exciting a thing to highlight. Plus, there are few enough people left in this valley that if you get tasked with killing a couple of them, that kind of feels awful.
Yeah, no, I mean, we there's lots of stories that we would love to tell with that, but we without more resources to specifically kind of making that feature really sing in a mode like this where you want everything to feel really bespoke and sort of handcrafted. It just wasn't quite the right set of tools for this particular project.
Especially because everyone in the world of Heartland is a unique, bespoke character. It's not like you can have like characters that feel like, oh, they're throwaway bad guys you can kill. But every character is like handcrafted. It's like if you kill a few of them, it feels like it takes on a darker tone than doing it in a more procedurally generated game where they're they feel like randos.
Yeah.
If you want to think of it as a sly nod to the original State of Decay, where there also weren't any NPCs you could kill, you can go ahead and do that too. You have my permission.
SXO 6 Maze 1 wants to know how come we didn't decide that the start of the Blood Plague was specifically at the Undead Labs office in downtown Marshall?
How do you know it wasn't?
We haven't said anything.
Who knows, right?
It actually started with Brand. Spoiler.
Come on.
Okay, so Dunedane wants to know, if the bridges were blown and the tunnel was filled, how did the heroes get into the valley?
Don't you dare try to use logic on us.
They're walking. They're accumulating on the whole other side of the map.
We actually talked about this a lot. That's a big reason why they're stuck there. Is because they had just hiked through the mountains, to get there, and
they've used up all their food and their bullets and their resources.
Exactly. Because like a normal person would probably come across that situation and be like,
bye.
Holy shit, I'm out, But because they had just used up everything they had, they had to settle down and.
And also, more importantly, because we said so.
Because Brand said so.
Oh, don't throw me under the bus.
So Ricky Sterling, now that we've gone through a bunch of the characters, Ricky Sterling wants to know about Vic and Isaac and their daughter.
Oh, speaking of tragedy, there's a couple who have lost the most important person to them, and it's torn them apart. And you as a player are forced with the decision of can you take a side, and whose side are you going to take? Can you try to reconcile these two, or is there just no fixing this problem? For those who have experienced that kind of trauma, sometimes there's no going back. There's no repairing the relationship that was there before. And that was a story that we wanted to touch on. Obviously, it's not the focus of the game, but I feel like we were able to create characters that felt like they could be real people there, coping with that kind of a tragedy.
Yeah, and it's interesting sort of how we ended up needing to sort of like meld the story aspect of those characters with the mechanical aspect of them, where because you could only choose one of them, we had to sort of figure out what role those two characters could play in the base that would make them make it meaningful to grab one and not the other. So we decided to make them both the Doctor characters, right?
The different flavors of the Doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that gives you yet another choice point where your decisions during the game can diverge your experience and give you two different games, both of which are good, but which feel a little bit different. Let you build slightly different resources, slightly different base.
Ouchio Kids wants to know, is Chavez the only recruit with different traits depending on the quest steps taken? Yeah, I think so.
I think so, yeah. That was one of those very late complexities. Those sorts of story elements that we discover through play and testing. It seems like if you do X, Y should be true in the game, and then we all look at whoever's responsible for that mission and go, "Can you get that in?"
With Chavez. So I was assigned to implement Chavez, and it actually reveals one of my weaknesses as a designer, which is my tendency to try to make every single possible choice possible. So I'm like, okay, well, I want you to be able to decide whether to bring him with you on this mission. Well, then that feels like that should have consequences and it should be meaningful. Oh, and then what if you get partway into the mission and you change your mind and you want to come back and get him? And I basically made such a nightmare for Scott Shapiro, who was the tester assigned to the missions, because there's like a very large an exponential number of different ways you could decide to play through that mission, and they had to try every single one of them, which was just kind of, I feel very bad, but at the same time, once it's done and it works and your agency matters, it starts to feel,
it's cool stuff.
Feel
No,
good,
it
yeah.
really is. I don't know. So some people might disagree with how I sort of ran the team, but I actually really like letting people sort of run with their desires in that regard. So while sometimes it may like not all the missions necessarily work exactly the same way, like I like a little bit of that chaos, a little bit of that diversity in the game. Like the Fallout games are some of my favorite games, and those missions were all kind of like where some of them
they all come from different heads. You can tell, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Have we talked in other streams about why we limited the map in the way we did?
Oh, like-
Slicing off a couple of areas from the original Trumbull Valley?
I don't think we actually got into that with
This
Luis.
is a pretty common question that I've seen here on the stream and been asked by other folks. Maps are big and complicated things. They are, I would say, by far the most complicated and fragile things that we have in our games. Making them work properly is an immense amount of work for a lot of people. The only way that we were going to get in any version of this map was to make a few judicious cuts, slice some areas away, which means fewer buildings that we have to draw, fewer buildings that we have to equip and light properly, and collision that we have to build.
Just so everyone, sorry to interrupt, but just so everyone knows, there were no props that we could bring over from the original. It wasn't an easy one-to-one. Like any building you see here that you recognize from the original game was rebuilt from scratch. And that's why they're not, the layouts aren't all the same. We've, like Mark, Undead Mark, who's in the chat right now, decided, he looked at what buildings worked, what layouts worked. Most of our buildings now have much more open and usable spaces now.
Yeah.
But, you still recognize the building from the outside. But everything
Still the
was,
gun shop.
everything was redone from scratch. As far as the buildings that were specific to the first State of Decay.
So early on, we just identified a couple places that can we live without this? Can we tell a good Trumbull Valley story without this section? And what can we sort of cut off early? And certainly, cutting off at the bridges, cutting off at the tunnel up to Mount Tanner.
Yeah.
Those were relatively painless cuts that we could make and have a map that we were happy with. Certainly, another cut that we could have made and didn't was that long windy road up to the Wilkerson house. It felt so wrong to us to include them in the game and not include their weird, creepy old house that was a bullet that we bit and took on a significant additional chunk of work to deliver that section.
Yeah.
Underwhelming Ace wants to know, if you complete your story, do the characters go into your survival pool? They don't. We haven't figured out a graceful way to, for instance, if you beat Heartland multiple times and you just ended up piling up all of your Heartland characters, multiple copies of them, into the pool, there's some awkwardness there that would be really difficult when you pull them out again. So we haven't figured out a graceful way to do that. If we do come up with a really good way to incorporate these characters into other parts of State of Decay, we'd love to figure out a way to do it, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, one of the drawbacks of every one of our DLC expansions through the history of the game being a weird one-off experiment is they don't always play very well together. If you look back at the history of the game, every one of those, Breakdown, Lifeline, Daybreak, and now Heartland, feels different than anything that's come before. And there are times where those systems don't play very well together. And rather than throw them together and create a really bad and broken experience, sometimes we just say, let each one of them be their own thing and be apart, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's actually one thing I forgot to even mention, the fact that their fifth skills don't even apply to the bases in the main game. So we would need to restructure them in a lot of important ways to make it work.
We like to try new things.
We do. It's in the DNA of the studio. We're always experimenting, and we love doing that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like at the beginning of this mode, right? Like we didn't know exactly how we were going to build it. We had this theory, and we had kind of fallbacks. We were like, okay, we could hack this together if we had to, but like we didn't know exactly how it was going to be built. So we took a calculated risk, and working with engineers to make it less painful, to hack some of this stuff together over time. We were able to get something fairly respectable out on the other side. But we did take a big swing with how different the characters are, from the way they're constructed in the base game. And so, it did create
Can't believe we found a base as big
challenges,
as
but
this.
we think it was totally worth it. You know, it ended up being really fun.
So we've got another quick trivia giveaway to do. So let's run through this one real quick. This one involves another one of my favorite lines from the game. So if you've played State of Decay Heartland, you probably know how to finish this sentence. What is it that roareth thus? Can it be the what? What is it that roareth thus? Can
That's a
it
good
be
one.
the what? Okay, so you guys go ahead and get an answer for that. In the
My
meantime,
stomach, I didn't eat anything today.
Oh no.
Death Crow wants to know, was there a person that inspired Isby? She's very colorful.
No one in particular. That was just sort of a weird confluence of events. We had this idea of a conspiracy-laden hacker-type character, and I wanted a younger voice for that. So I looked at our roster of young voices and said, "Oh, our Isabella voice is this young, peppy, sort of college-type voice. That'd be an interesting one to apply here." So it was really just a blending of her existing personality with this overlay of conspiracy hacker, which I'm sure is drawn from any number of TV shows and movies that we've seen over the past 20 years.
Yeah. But her like peppy positivity about how wrong everyone else is and how right she is.
Right. She's not one of those creepy conspiracy folks who lurks in a basement and plots the overthrow. Like, no, she's just like, oh, you're so cute. You don't understand how the world really works.
Yeah, and then
And
I
then
said
her nickname just sort of popped into my head. I don't even know where it came from.
That's good.
But
yeah, no, I like that one a lot. And I mentioned on the previous stream that one of her traits, inside person, is actually based on my daughter, who talks about how the fact that she's an inside person.
Oh,
and all.
that's awesome.
She comes home from school, gets in her bed with her laptop, and we don't see her again
You know what? That is,
for the
that
rest
is
of the
so
day.
legit.
But that sounds a lot like Isby. So
speaking of using friends and family in the game, I got a text from one of my buddies like the day after it came out, screaming at me because he and the rest of our gaming group had all been brutally murdered by blood plague zombies in Marshall. There's a note that you can find on one of the missions that's a journal from one of the soldiers, and it lists a bunch of troops, Kukas and Wynn and Russell, and yeah, that's all my gaming group. They just all got eaten by zombies. So my friend Viet was very upset. How could you kill us all like that? It's like, well, you know, I killed you in XCOM last year, so now I'm going to kill you. Guys.
I thought those notes were a great late game addition. Actually, they really nice narrative design touch.
Dalamar too, actually, in the chat was commenting on that too, that they really liked the notes, and that actually the original idea for that came from Scott Shapiro, from our tester. They were going through all of our all the missions and had to go through each one a million times and was really getting to know all the characters. It was like, you know what? I feel like these characters would pop a little bit more if you could learn a little bit more about their history than you can learn from just going step by step through the mission. And so they made the suggestion, and it ended up just sitting as a suggestion bug in my queue for a long time until I said, okay, yeah, I'll put some objects in there. Handed Andy the objects, and then Andy decided what to do with them all.
Those little bits of found story are fun to play with. Like they're not broadcast to you. They're not part of any critical mission, but when you find them, it just gives you a little more depth of understanding what has gone on in this place before you got here.
So we've got some winners again for our giveaway. So first, let's reveal the answer to this question. What is it that roareth thus? Can it be the motor bus? This is from a piece of doggerel poetry that was featured in a book that I had called The Superior Person's Book of Words, and it's kind of a. It's actually, this is the first time I'm revealing this. I don't know if Foggy is listening to the stream right now, but it's a book that I had sitting in my bathroom for a really, really long time. And it's a really funny book, Superior Person's Book of Words. Go look it up. But I got tired of it. We didn't have enough room in my house, so I just snuck it onto Foggy's desk and didn't tell him where it came from. And he asked me several times if I knew where this book came from. I'm like, I don't know. I've never seen that. But I kind of the cat's out of the bag because this line is from that book. So
that's awesome.
I hope he's watching and he enjoys.
Did anybody get that?
Oh, no. Why would anyone get that? It's an extremely obscure thing.
I certainly didn't when I saw it in the mission text.
It's what Andy left it alone because he's like, I'm not touching this. It's radioactive.
It was hilarious hearing the voice actors
Stumble through these
they're
lines.
Just like, okay.
Please read it exactly as written.
So, Brant, AB Select Start wants to know, where did that cat penguin graffiti art come from? Do you know?
Yes.
That's not Brant.
That is from a streamer named Snowy Death Penguin, who has been streaming our game for a long time. He's also legally blind, and yet still drives his car better than I do in our game.
That's awesome.
Really great person, entertaining, and he had a cool logo. And one day, Undead Mark and I were like, "That's a really cool logo. Let's see if we can use it." And so we have a couple of those in here, where we have a track record of like supporting our streamers as much as we can, and we have quite a few like nods to people who've supported our game. So that's one of them.
Guys, I messed up. I forgot to say who won. A bunch of you got this one right, but the people who win the prizes are Magic Man 79. Magic Man 79, very different numbers there. On Twitch, on YouTube, we've got Katana, and on Mixer, we got Relish3430. So all of you folks, contact Megan at social@undeadlabs.com to make sure that you get your prizes, and you guys are going to get some free codes for Heartland. So anyway, back to the game.
Go get in some trouble.
Yeah,
Go find
get in
some
some trouble.
zombies.
I've just been trying to avoid anything that might be story related.
He
But
did it, guys. He got all the zombies.
I can certainly find some trouble.
Okay, we've got a question that's actually come from multiple people about why don't characters get tired or need sleep in Heartland?
That was a mechanical decision we
Step
made
2,
early on
find useful
because
Already got all
we
I
have
can handle.
these very important personal arcs that occur early in the game, whether you're playing Quincy and Helena and going after Ray Santos, or playing Larice and looking for your father. There are these long multi-objective, multi-mission arcs. And in our game, if you're playing as the sponsor of a personal arc and you change characters, that arc goes away for a little while and doesn't come back for a time. And what we have found is that when people see that message of, hey, this mission's going to be abandoned for a while, they freak out and don't want to play. And in playtest, what we found is that people were playing those starting characters to exhaustion and death, trying to complete those missions before switching out. And we didn't want that to be the way people played. So we explored a lot of different options, but ultimately we found that just removing fatigue was the simplest and easiest way to do it. Lots of players don't even notice that it's not there. It definitely makes the game a touch easier, but we felt like with Blood Plague turned up to 12, that was an okay sacrifice.
Yeah, and there's different kinds of hard and easy in games, right? Like there's making a game hard where like it requires more skill, and there's making a game hard where it requires more time and more tedium, and and sometimes that's a valuable tool to have. But I think in this particular case, I think we managed to by pulling back on the fatigue, we're not really making the game easier, we're making it paced better, which is sort of a different kind of choice.
Well, it's an incentive, right? Like in the base game, it very much makes sense to have characters have these kinds of arcs where they get fatigued, you switch, and it encourages you to switch around and try a bunch of different characters. It's the opposite in this game, where we want you to care about specific character stories and pick a protagonist and kind of go with them for long periods of time. So it just made sense.
Yeah, if all you want to do is play Larice for 14 hours, that's totally fine. You can do that. I mean, if you've got first aid kits and plague cure and stuff like that, you can keep a character going for a long time. If that's the person you really want to care about, that's the voice you want to hear. Certainly, it's not critical to play that way, but it is an option.
So we got a question from Metro Train, a highly technical question about multi-GPU configurations, and I just wanted to acknowledge that this is not the team that can answer that question. This is the sort of kind of the writing and mission staff, which
I know what a GPU is.
Yeah.
My answer to that is what?
Undead Mark specifically wonders if Brant wants to tackle that question.
Yes, I got. Thanks, Mark, for your confidence vote.
So it's 2:50. We're getting close to the end of the stream, and there was actually something special that we wanted to do, which is, I don't know if you guys, you can put headphones on in a second if you want to check this stuff out, but we've got a dev diary that was put together with, which includes interviews with these fine people, and it's going up on our YouTube channel, and we actually wanted to share it with you guys here for the first time. So since you folks are around, why don't you just kind of chill out and watch this little lovely movie that we've made about making this game. I need to figure out where I put it though. Oh,
Smoke
it's over.
if you got 'em.
It is right here.
What? All right, so we're not going to say a whole lot about it, but we got something special planned. We want fans to be ready to return to Trumbull Valley in 2019. Go check out State of Decay.
All right. Well, there it is.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much. All right, well, now.
It just came to me one night. I was like, we have this map in the original game that I think would be fun to experiment with on some ideas that I had for where we could start taking the franchise forward. So even though it's the exact same layout, we had to really take that into consideration of, if we want to do this thing, there are implications here for how you play, how you traverse the map, what performance might mean. It was a little bit of experimentation to see, like, does it feel fun to even go through this stuff, and is it play well?
We chose to make Heartland story-based because it was a request that a lot of our fans had made, and it was something that as developers we really wanted to do. We wanted to return to Trumbull.
Story in games is actually a really fascinating challenge because the best part of games is that the player gets to make decisions about what they're going to do on a moment-to-moment basis. That's why I try to find ways to have story emerge, to bubble up from systems and the choices that the player makes, rather than trying to impose it from the top down.
On Heartland, we want to create more of a linear storyline with a couple of branches and dynamic elements on the outside. So we had to create some technology to make sure that we could do that. Basically supporting the mission designers, making sure that they could create the story that they wanted to tell.
I make missions, all sorts of missions. Big missions, small missions, complicated missions, simple missions. Mostly complicated missions. So I did the personal arcs, is what we call them, of the main characters. So Fee, Larissa, and Quincy, and Helena. That whole line from them getting to Trumbull Valley and all the way through, like, the end of what they were there for.
The characters came out of a kind of a Hollywood writer's room process that we're just kind of introducing for the first time. We get to tell the story of what happened in between State of Decay 1 and State of Decay 2 at that place. And so players get to go back to an area that's familiar, but it's also going to be very different.
It's perfect having it set in Trumbull, since one of the big things we're looking to do is explore the mysteries of the Blood Plague, and to have the before and after of a place that players know, like Trumbull Valley, is great for that. It tells a lot of story. If you see a landmark that's covered in Blood Plague goop, it's a lot more telling if you've seen it before. So a lot of these places, like the Fork in the Road Diner, it's a memorable place for us.
I was primarily tasked with working on the end game content of Heartland. A couple of the missions that lead up to what we're calling the Gauntlet, which is the final stages of returning to Trumbull, and hinting at things that may be answers.
From a production standpoint, it was just a complete step up in terms of the amount of people that worked on it and for the amount of time. We really put a lot of the studio on this project for quite some time because we knew we wanted to make something big.
I think Heartland is special because we got to tell a story in a new way for State of Decay 2. And telling, like, the whole story of an area from, like, beginning to end is something that we didn't get to do yet.
Quite a few things make Heartland special. Everyone you meet is a unique crafted character. All of them have special skills and traits that come in and play a role in your community and make your home base stronger. Biggest, baddest home base we've ever had, with a lot of actions and facilities. The last thing is the influence of the Blood Plague on Trumbull Valley. Now all the freaks are Blood Plague freaks.
I love the fact that Heartland blends the old with the new. It was very nostalgic for me to drive around places that I haven't really poked around in a couple years. I was a huge fan of the original game, so I have a soft spot in my heart for those roads and those buildings and that crashed plane.
When you feel that it's starting to overwhelm you, when you feel that fear creeping in, it might be good to listen to your gut.
Another bug that I was working on that was kind of funny, there's a mission where you gotta rescue someone who's sick. And if you fail at any point in the mission, they die because it's a life-threatening situation and all that. You could get into situations where you'd bring them back to base, talk to someone at your base, and then switch over to that person's mission, but you hadn't finished the previous mission, so your buddy's head would explode right in front of your face. It was pretty sweet.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Thanks, OBS. All right, anyway, so there's our dev diary, and I especially love that last one because that was in the Chavez mission, and that one was my fault, that particular bug, where I didn't realize that when you switch to another mission and you've got a follower, it automatically like abandons your old mission, and so I had, when you abandon Chavez's mission, Chavez dies of the blood plague, and I didn't know that his head was just going to explode right in front of you. So I'm glad that made the cut. We got a lot of positive comments from people in the chat about Leah when she was talking about how she had worked on those personal arcs. People were really complimenting the personal arcs and saying we ought to get Leah in here one of these days.
Yeah.
She doesn't work on Tuesdays, and so that's why we usually haven't gotten her in here, but we might need to try to negotiate some kind of schedule change to get her in here.
She's been on the stream before.
She has a while ago when her schedule was different, so we need to work something out. So.
Kevin Jason, you were talking about the
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he loved it.
It'd be nice to.
Yeah, I love the fact that Kevin and his team were able to bring in new music that still felt of a kind. There's an opening strain right after the voiceover from Dr. Hoffman as you're sort of coming into the game, where you hear a really familiar strain of State of Decay theme, but a couple of notes are changed, I think, to right at the end, and it creates a very different mood. Delicious little start to the game.
Spectre Saunders says that Leah is the Lily Ritter of Undead Labs.
She's much nicer. She's very upbeat, though.
Yeah.
She's very positive and upbeat.
She is the friendly, welcoming voice of Undead Labs. So we're running low on time here, but I wanted to quickly remind some folks about some things. First off, Refurium. If you like watching State of Decay 2 streams, you should totally be registered on Refurium so you can get prizes for it. So don't forget about that. Another thing, tomorrow, Decay Fest is kicking off. It starts June 19th. If you go to their Discord or if you follow them on Twitter, you can find out what the schedule is. The schedule is big and elaborate. It's basically a bunch of people streaming for several days, specifically celebrating State of Decay Heartland, and it's a great place to sort of get to meet some new streamers, to find new other enthusiasts in State of Decay 2. So please go and join that. And I think that's just about it. If anybody has any final comments they want to make.
Thanks, everybody, for being here and playing Heartland.
That's right.
Thanks for checking it out.
As usual, we love you.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys taking time out of your day.
Yep. So thank you, Brant, for running the game while most of us were sitting here ignoring you.
That's right. Most people really do that on a regular basis.
And then, of course, Andy Collins, our writing guy, and Cale Schupman, our story guy. Thanks for coming in here. And next week, we are going to be talking about the Gauntlet. We're going to be talking about sort of the big last challenge in State of Decay Heartland. So if you guys want to, those of you who haven't finished the game yet, if you guys want to get into the Gauntlet so that we can talk about it with you, we're going to get some folks in here next week who know a lot about it, and they'll be able to share the process of developing that part of the game.
Learn some pro strats.
Exactly. So thank you all again for coming, and we are so happy that we can spend this time with you every week, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
And this is now 15 seconds of end screen that we can talk over.
Awkward sign off. My favorite time. The best time.
I should have a stopwatch or something so I know when the 15 seconds is up. I usually just estimate.
Yeah.